is 7:04. We'll call the September 9th Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Malone,
Here.
Sobek,
Here.
Leclerc,
Here.
McKinnon, absent, Caledon present.
Okay, we have a quorum. We have an agenda for tonight. Yes, I have copies of the agenda up here if anybody wants them.
I do.
Yeah. Without any changes, I would be looking for a motion on the agenda. Unless somebody has something to add.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion by Anthony, second by Ken. All in favor, say aye.
And,
Opposed? We have an agenda. We have minutes. Did you guys get the minutes from last
yeah,
meeting?
she probably had to pass them on.
I printed them out earlier.
Before now.
Before nap.
I thought they were fine.
Good job on these minutes, by the way, Carl.
Thank you.
Sometimes they're not easy.
No, sometimes they're not, sometimes they are.
It's nice that we have videotapes now, and Karen used to record them for us, so that was,
That's nice.
yeah. There was a couple times I leaned on Karen from audio. So. Any discussion on minutes? If not, I'll be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of the July meeting.
We have a motion by Ken, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Anthony. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Public comment. Anybody have any comments? Room's all leaning to this side today, so. Okay, hearing none, we'll close public comment period. Ripping through this. No written correspondence today unless anybody else got anything. Reports, Board of Trustees.
The board met August 14th. We discussed, we're getting signs for the North End Park, cause there's been some problems with people going from the North End Park onto the neighbor's property, so we're getting no trespassing signs. As of September 1st, Kona Septic was no longer doing porta johns, so we're looking at switching to probably a Kona Septic, not 100% sure at this time. We're upgrading the cameras at the hall so they have more storage on them, because we added more cameras with the drop box outside. The concrete pad was poured up at the cemetery for the Veterans Memorial, and I believe now the boulders have been put in place. The dredging permit is all set for the North End Park, and dredging will be done next spring. Pretty much it.
Thanks, Anthony. Zoning Board of Appeals, we did have a meeting on August 15th. The Zoning Board of Appeals, for everybody's information, there's basically two roles. One is for people that are applying for variances, to the zoning ordinance, and then a second role is kind of to be a judge. This was a case where the applicant had asked the zoning board of appeals to overturn our zoning administrator's decision on something. And that was one experience that I've lived, that I don't ever wanna be a judge when I grow up. I learned that. Yeah, it was, that was a tough thing, because there was a lot of money involved in it, and we had the ordinance, and that just, that we're dealing with. And that just gave me a lot of incentive to try to get this ordinance done and updated, and, it's a reason that the ordinances need to happen, and they need to, we need to keep updating them as required. That was a really tough case, so. But that applicant did get a favorable ruling, so they're able to keep proceeding with, their house the way they originally applied for, so. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit on other things, on the old business, so. Zoning administrator, anything, Nick? No?
Nope.
Okay, tri-township planning. We did not have a tri-township planning meeting, since our last meeting, but we have one coming up on October 17th at 7 p.m. It's gonna be at the Hawes Township Hall, so we'll be talking about that too. There's some homework to do for that one, so. No new business, move on to old business. New zoning ordinance. For everybody's information, we had, we're supposed to have a public hearing tonight on the new zoning ordinance. And as part of the process for that, it has to be published in the Alcona paper, because the Alcona papers are our paper of record. And it's gotta be published for 2 weeks prior, and 2 weeks ago, we looked at the paper and it wasn't in there. So, Cindy actually consulted with Denise, and Denise said we should postpone it and schedule a new public hearing so that it's published correctly, so that's why it got canceled. And then following that, we had the ZBA meeting, which kinda gave us some reason to start looking at this again. Yeah, it worked out actually alright, so. So with that, under the ordinance review, there was a couple things in light of that last meeting, that I passed out. One starts out with section 2.1 definitions, is the first section. In our current ordinance, as well as in the draft that we have right now, one thing that we've learned is that we really don't have a good definition of what is a building foundation, whether it be a house or a pole barn or a shed. And that came up as part of this, as part of the zoning board of appeals discussion. And so we asked Denise, we actually had a Zoom meeting with Denise, Cindy FC, the township attorney, and myself. And we kind of presented her with a couple of the things that we had learned through at that meeting. And we asked her to give us a definition, or a further defined foundation. And basically, what we had talked about is basically where the building, or the foundation of the building hits the ground and it projects through the ground level. So that would be the location of basically where you could build a house. For instance, if it were up against a setback line, it's where the wall penetrates the ground, the foundation wall. Whether it's a concrete wall, or whether it's a spread footing on a slab or anything like that. That's what we had talked about. In light of the ZBA decision that came down, the zoning board of appeals kind of looked at it and ultimately decided that under the current ordinance, it's any part of the foundation, which could be the footing, which actually sticks outside the basement wall by 4 inches. So what that would do is actually reduce the building envelope by 4 inches on both sides. A 50-foot lot would be 49 foot, minus 8 inches. So that's one thing that, we wanted to make sure that we clarified that a little bit, so it's clearly understood. So that the items in red on that were the verbiage that she had put together. Does anybody have any questions on that? I'm assuming you had read this real quick, but without having a meeting amongst ourselves, we tried to plug that in and looked at Cindy not Cindy, looked at Denise to give us a little bit of input. Nick, did you have any other input on that?
No, I'm still reviewing that in conjunction with some other parts of the ordinances that they referenced when they were talking through their attorney speech.
Okay. Alright. When it comes to the building, basically she added that verbiage in red where the outer perimeter of the building shall be the point at which the foundation projects out of the ground. And that's basically what I was saying. So setbacks, that's where the setbacks would be measured from, so. The second item was under non-conforming buildings, which is in section 322.
Can we go back to this for a second?
We sure can.
In this, closed perimeter foundation, could we just add the word typically consisting of materials? Just put the word typically in, because that leaves it open for wood or those foam or whatever.
That's a good comment, because with the different types of foundations.
And to see, maybe it needs to be covered in the future.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of brick covered structures around here, but it becomes an issue with brick and block.
Yeah.
So we were trying to keep it simplified so that it doesn't become too much of an issue. So.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. Moving forward to non-conforming buildings and structures, in that ZBA meeting, there was, in the kind of the background of the discussions there was a lot of references to the building and what is considered to be a addition versus a tear down. And with that, we felt that we wanted to try to get a little bit more clarification in the zoning ordinance with respect to not only non-conforming buildings, but at what point does a building become a new building versus an addition? In other words, if somebody were to apply to the township for a zoning permit for an addition and apply to the building department for an addition, and essentially at what point, if they continue to tear the building down, an existing building, to rebuild it, at what point does it really become a new build? And with respect to the zoning ordinance, Denise added a couple, the alterations of non-conforming buildings. And there's a couple things in here where she had talked about, or she's asking us to look at building heights with respect to a second story. For instance, if we have an existing single-story cabin that's encroaching into a setback, and somebody comes in for a alteration, and they get a ZBA approval, or if they're building if they get a building permit to tear down a portion of that building, can they go up with a second story on it? Versus, is it okay for a one-story building? And that's a discussion that, frankly, it's up to us to decide, the township board to approve it at some point, so. So increasing the height of a non-conformity is what, essentially that's talking about there.
In the purpose, it says, one of the goals is that non-conforming will either be eliminated or changed to conforming. I don't see why we would say, okay, then you can increase the height. You know, that's changing it to even more non-conforming, I would think, or at least potentially.
That's definitely one, and the other thing that I had thought about, and we actually, Nick and I had a discussion about that too, is if you get a neighbor that has a house farther back, and somebody takes a single-story house and adds a second floor to it, you could block a view.
Or a third floor, or a
Or a
fourth floor, I mean.
Well, we have height regulations.
okay.
But
I would
yes.
think with the goal being that it has, that you, the goal is to eliminate it eventually. It would seem like that's contrary to the goal, to me.
Just, you know, we wanna be if they wanna put new trusses on, see if we can, and shitty, and they wanna put new trusses, and I guess on that, like, part work, you know what I mean? Does somebody have homemade thing, we're gonna save this, we're gonna do it the right way, you actually gain a foot or two, you know what I mean? I guess how do you,
And if you're limited on your square footage this way, it would be nice to be able to do that.
That's the discussion, that's a tough one. You know, from a perspective of the ordinance, we do have height ordinances on structures for height requirements, as far as the maximum height. And you know, it can be argued either way, do we wanna allow somebody to, you know, build a bigger, better, possibly house and increase the height, or, you know, hold it to that. And this is only referring to something as a non-conformity, it's not the other part of the house that meets the requirements.
I don't know if going upward.
There were also discussions at the ZBA meeting, it was really never clearly answered. And hopefully the changes to any changes to the ordinance may help eliminate that, was what if the foundation goes up a little bit, if they add to the foundation? So it lowers the bottom part of the house, which one story would increase the top of the first floor level. So there's a little bit of complexity to that also, so. But I think overall, I think she's asking us to task ourselves with the, decision of how do we want to interpret the ordinance, or set the ordinance with respect to the height of non-conforming structures. So. And thank you for mentioning that, that was one discussion, the first section in non-conformities is the ordinance is trying to eliminate
If you're gonna
non-conformities.
eliminate it, it seems like change would be discouraged.
Yeah. So she kinda outlined two options there, and I think she's looking for us. Yeah, kinda pick one, or something different, so.
What's your opinion?
Just as it was in that ZBA meeting, that's a tough call. I think, from my perspective, I think that because the ordinance is trying to eliminate nonconformities, we probably should not try to increase nonconformities. But I say that from the standpoint that the nonconformity is actually an area, that's not a height that the zoning ordinance allows. So I think it could go either way, but I'm kinda leaning toward, because if I were the neighbor to somebody that had a house and they put up a second story and started blocking my view, that probably wouldn't make me very happy. You know, putting myself in the perspective of a neighbor. So I'm probably leaning toward,
But if they had the room, they could tear that down and build a two-story house.
if they tore it down, they would have to build a two-story house
That
within the,
conforms.
Right.
yeah, within the building envelope, so. And I think the larger width lots probably don't matter too much, but when you get a 50-foot lot,
Yeah.
every inch counts. You thinking, Ken?
Yeah, I don't see either way, no matter what you do here.
Should we do a straw poll? I agree with Denise's request to have us pick one, and it also helps us give Nick direction when somebody, clarity when somebody comes to him, so. And of course, this is something that the board, when it comes back to the board, may wanna look at this also, cause it's a big thing, so. Alright, let's start with A, B, or other. Barb?
I think it should be, shall not be increased, only because I think that's more consistent with our stated purpose.
Anthony?
And I agree, that's what the purpose is.
Unless we're gonna change our stated purpose.
Right. I don't think we wanna do that. I think that's been part of the ordinance for,
Right.
going back as far as at least the
It
current
just seems
ordinance.
to me like this one would encourage the opposite of the first one.
I should have allowed you to give your opinion last, but sorry about that.
It's tough, cause like you say, it'd be nice if, I guess I don't know if there's lots where, how hard it would be to make it conforming to where you couldn't. I don't know, I think.
Well, the other option also is if somebody has a single story, if somebody has a two-story non-conforming building, then this doesn't really apply.
Right.
Because they can rebuild two
Or
stories.
most of the cabins
Yeah.
or old cabins
Are
would be
single story.
Single story.
Yeah, and somebody would also have the ability to go to the zoning board of appeals and ask for a second story. Which, that's a right that's there, so. Ken, your thoughts?
Guess you don't have to lean towards not increasing it. You know, that's-
Because as far as the trusses and stuff, you are allowed, there's nothing in this ordinance that shall prevent the strengthening or restoring to a safe condition.
Shouldn't, I'm just saying, I mean,
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't want something that they can't walk with the building on this lot. Granddaddy built his trusses, and that's not how it's gonna be now, but we want it's gonna be this.
is there a way to write this with an exception then, or something like that?
I guess, I don't know. I guess as long as, you know,
Well, I think that
it's
it's,
just cover the maintenance, you believe, then they shouldn't have a problem going to.
well, there's, with respect to maintenance, the ordinance does allow for, repair of structures if something rots out. So if the trusses rot out, you can tear the roof off and replace it kind of in kind. And then the ordinance also defines building height. I don't recall if it's to the middle of the roof height wise, or if it's to the eave or the peak, but, I believe the ordinance does have, you know, definitions of how that's calculated, so. But I think anybody that, you know, I would advise that regardless of how it happens, if somebody comes to Nick, I'm gonna tear the roof off my non-conforming use, a good bit of advice might be to better make sure you measure the height of it. You know, to the top end of the, per the ordinance requirements. So it sounds like we have three, and I'm also in favor of that, of not increasing that conformity. So basically, sections 322C1A would be modified such that structural alterations or extensions which do not increase the nonconformity of a building or structure shall be permitted, with a building or structure which is non-conforming due to insufficient setbacks shall not be increased in height, is what we would. And she could probably come up with a little better language than me trying to piecemeal two sentences here, but.
What the accidental means.
The ordinance allows for, if you look on page 2, under 322B3, it allows for repairs and maintenance, strengthening or restoring to a safe condition.
Yep.
Any part of a non-conforming building. The C2 deals with explosions, disasters, fires. So if you had a fire, you could rebuild it basically.
If you're tearing something apart and you block the foundation of the backhoe, could I?
That's the
Accidental, could be argued.
That's the struggle.
Pretty very much to do.
Yes, that was the struggle. In my opinion, I think 3 kind of helps it out a little bit here. I looked at several ordinances in different communities, and I kept kind of going back to kind of backing up a little bit, instead of looking at trees, look at the forest. And Epic does a demolition of a building, convert from an addition to a new build.
Right.
And trying to eliminate the situation where somebody tears down 95% of the house and they've got it demolished, and then they find out the last 5%'s bad, and oh, too bad, we gotta start all over again, and they get a brand new house. And
We understood it was bad from the way it was tore down.
in that situation, yes, but I'm trying to look generally.
Yeah, I know, but I'm
So-
just saying that there's nothing stopping a neighbor from whacking the foundation with a backhoe and calling Harry and saying, hey.
So this is where we had talked to Denise about there's two different ways that I saw that different communities handle this. Is a lot of the communities look at, okay, if you're gonna tear a portion of the house down and rebuild a portion, like an addition, if the value of the addition is increased by 50%, it increases the value of the house by 50%, then it's considered a new build. And the challenge with that methodology is now you have the introduction of assessors and then who's right on the value and who's wrong, or maybe not necessarily who's wrong, but whose opinion of the value do you live with? Because now you put an assessor or you get private appraisers that may look at the value as being different, and sometimes that can be a lot of money. So we had asked her to look at more with respect to just area, because it's something that's quantifiable. So if you're gonna tear down 50% of your house, and we excluded garages, porches, decks, patios. So it's just basically the main portion of the house, then it becomes a new build. And our ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, national new build says you have to eliminate non-conformities.
So then it has to conform.
Then it has to conform. So I think this paragraph here, in fact, I question whether it should be in this portion of the ordinance in non-conformities, or if it should be in a different portion of the ordinance for every building. Because this section of the ordinance only deals with non-conformities, and I would hate to have somebody come to us with a new build with a house that's, you know, all lying within the building envelope, an existing house, they want to tear it down. This should apply to that also. That was my only concern about this, was that I think it shouldn't apply just to non-conformities, but to every addition, so to speak. So this is where, again, these are the 3 stipulations that she put in, and I pretty much agree with them. I just don't know if this is the place to have it in the ordinance, or if it should be somewhere else. And then Lena and Nick to help us through that, if there's another section of the ordinance that
Don't lean on me tonight.
no. But I think tonight's a good discussion for us to be able to get more feedback, because these are big ones. I don't want to have to go through another case like that again. So. Does anybody have any thoughts on these?
So she wrote in there buildings or structures, right?
Correct. Yep.
What is a structure? Well, the reason I ask is because I said right from the get-go, they tore down the structure. But then they said, oh no, we didn't, because the foundation is the structure.
Seems like we need that in our definition.
Yeah, this in the definition of building.
I think the structure is in the definition, if I'm not mistaken.
The way you talk about it.
Well, in that situation, the attorney was calling everything the structure, the foundation, the footings, everything.
But it seems like if it's in here, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, structure is in here on the new ordinance. Because he was dealing with the old ordinance also.
Oh, yeah.
It's on page 240, 2-40.
Within the
Yeah, it is an old one.
It is.
It's actually page 2-30.
Everything else is on the ground.
Yeah, so that definition actually did not change in here. So that may be something we wanna ask her to clarify for us a little bit more. And I think that building and structure could mean two different things. I think you could have a structure that could be a lean-to for a lumber yard. It may not necessarily be a building, it may be a structure. As opposed to what we think of as a building, but as a house or a commercial building, so.
Literally, this reads, it's on the ground, not in the ground.
Right.
So that part, I mean, makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but just not with your case.
Right, and we may have to ask her to clarify that a little bit for us.
Cause the way he kept talking was the structure was in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
but according to our, it's
It's
not.
on the ground.
Yeah, it says on the ground or attachment to something having a permanent location on the ground. So, that's a tough one, that definition needs some love.
Maybe such as a foundation or.
Yeah, this was a struggle.
Reason I ask is again, structure. So what about a garage
No, garage could be considered a building.
or a structure, right? So if somebody tore it down, but the foundation is still there, they can leave it where it's at and rebuild it currently. They don't have to, I mean, if the foundation, the slab, poured slab, they tear the whole thing down, they can rebuild it as it sits.
Under the new ordinance, you'd be removing half of the building, more than 50%.
But didn't you put it, doesn't it say living space in there?
Yeah, oh yeah, you're right,
Right.
yeah.
So now you're talking,
You could rebuild a
that's a
garage.
big one around here is accessory structures that are within the setbacks. Garages, sheds, things like that, that they put in the setback area.
Mhm.
I've got one that called me today. They're 2.3 feet and 4.5 feet away from the lot line, and they wanna demo it and rebuild it. So I had to think back, am I gonna go back through the ZBA process, or do I tell them, you have the foundation there, so if you decide to leave that, then you can do what you want.
One,
They have the room to move it, that's what he told me, but he'd rather leave it there and rebuild it.
I'm really not liking the definition of structure in here to begin with. Anything constructed or erected is, that leaves.
Won't that apply to a doghouse?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that case it pivoted around that exact terminology and definitions.
fence needs to be worked on. I mean, it almost sounds like it could be a fence, the way it's written, could be called a structure.
Shed the line is roll off.
There you go.
Moving ready.
You can have a look at that.
We can, Nick, with respect to roll-off sheds, and I remember having a lot of discussion like with that and deer blinds. I don't recall whether we allow accessory structures to be in the setback, or,
No, nothing, because there was a conversation of anything, like the building department says anything over 200 square feet, they don't care about,
Mhm.
so.
Under 200.
Right, but again, Anthony doesn't like me on this one, because his opinion is let anybody do what they want with anything under 200 square feet. But now you're talking people putting 3, 4, 5 sheds on the property line. And I've got one guy that tried to do that with 3 of them, and I told him he couldn't put them on, on the property line. And he had already had his concrete poured, he had already had the gravel set and everything else, and he had to actually have it ripped up and moved. So regulating any type of shed is what we're, I don't want to say regulating, but trying to keep people from putting them on in the setbacks is. I've never had anybody call about a doghouse. I've had somebody call about a chicken coop. We had to take care of that, but outside of dog houses, deer blinds, usually when you're talking those pieces of property that put that kind of stuff up, you're talking 5, 10 acres of property that somebody's putting that stuff on, especially deer blinds. Never had anybody call about a deer blind. Now, it doesn't say that they won't, but just historically looking at it and talking to others, I don't see anybody calling on those.
Yeah.
Anymore, the first thing I ask anybody when they call me is, do you get along with your neighbors?
Right? I think it's probably a good opportunity for us to ask Denise to either clarify or combine those, or give us a little bit more direction on what she sees. Okay. That was her only, changes. I think that, I know she didn't have a whole lot of time to look at it, and she's probably gonna take another look at it also as this applies, so I think it'd be good for us to give her another opportunity, as well as give Nick a little bit more time to look at it. And, since he's the one that has to deal with these changes. So with that, I did go back and look, with it being in the public about the solar farms possibly coming. I went back and I have this sketch that I did, and I suspect this was done at the March 2024 meeting of berms.
We talked about it.
And I went back today and yesterday and looked at the solar ordinance, and for the life of me, I don't know how some of these did not get put in there. But there was a couple things that we had looked at was, and I did not see it, and this is on the second handout that I gave you folks, section 728. And there's a couple things that I looked at that I'd like to bring to our attention. One is on page 744, the second page in. having been on solar sites, the ones that I've been on, I had to go through a class when I entered the property, because anybody that goes on the property, it's a safety issue, not only because the site was under construction, but those can be dangerous. When you get close enough to them, they'll zap you just like any electrical touching a wire. But on 728B14, it talks about planned security measures to prevent unauthorized trespass and access during the construction, operation, removal, maintenance, or repair of large solar energy systems. It doesn't really talk about anything after the construction or repair.
I think that's where the fence came in, didn't it?
Yeah, and we had that in there, and my notes from, or at least my sketch that we had talked about, was from the right of way, any road right of way, having a 6-foot tall berm with trees on it, and then having a 7-foot tall fence.
Or whatever the state required.
Right. So I think something to that tune, and I believe there was, landscape or screening, that would be on page 745. It shall be completely enclosed by a perimeter security fence, so it's got it in there, excluding electric fence. So we got it, but we really don't define how big the fence is. And
That might be why we talked about it back in
right,
March.
right. So I think one of two things, either having a cross-section put in, similar to this, put it in the ordinance, or trying to put it in words.
Yeah, 'cause I thought this was going, I thought that was the plan, we had that.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we were just gonna kind of see what happened with the
Right.
state, which we kind of know now.
Mm-hmm. So I think if we're all in agreement with it, I'd like to have her draft up a exhibit to put in there. And the other thing I was thinking of is that, well, there's two things. One is the height of the trees. And here, do we want to specify a height of the tree, any trees that we put on a berm? Because that I did not see.
I think we talked
Well,
about rows too,
There is some.
Yeah.
whether we just have one row.
Yeah, and I had two
rows,
rows on here, and
And something about not taking out trees that already exist.
Which they can't, I don't think.
I think it would be prudent of us to have some, call it an exception, that maybe the planning commission, the township could approve. I hate to have,
You don't
An
wanna get
applicant
too
come in
much
and-
right now because they can just go to the state.
but I also don't wanna, from our perspective, I don't wanna have somebody go clear cut a bunch of trees to plant a berm.
Right.
So I think given the planning commission the discretion to be able to determine whether or not, or where, at the request of an applicant, we can omit having to have a berm. But we would still have to have a fence.
I think the fence is required through the state too.
I think it is.
Everyone I've ever seen has been fenced in. I mean, it seems like they would want them fenced in for security and safety.
I would almost think they're liability insurance.
Yeah, cause they're not safe. I would hate to see, one of the neighbors have the kids go out in one of those fields and get zapped. That would not be a pretty sight. Cause they're not that far off the ground either.
No.
You can reach up and grab them.
Yeah, the ones I've seen are where they're going out north there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so we'll do this section. think my recommendation for, if we wanna specify a height of the trees, would be to have them like 5 to 8 feet tall. That's a pretty typical, right? And the other question is, do we want evergreen trees, something that you can't see through?
That's
Yeah.
it.
And then as far as, the other thing that I run into in my daily life is maintenance of them. When you plant trees, a lot of times some of them will die. And we might wanna, I guess this is, it may be more of a board issue, is do we want any applicants to put up some escrow or some type of guarantee that if they die within a year or 2 years, they have to replace them?
Thought that was in here.
There's the performance guarantee, letter of credit. But it's under abandonment and decommissioning.
There was stuff as far as, screening.
Yeah, the screening's at 745.
We've got, including replacing dead vegetation within 6 months at 746.
Either 6 months or easiest feasible time of year, depending on the weather.
Okay. And we do call out evergreen trees in there also. Okay, so I think that having her add that, it's a good thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Carl, didn't we have some question of where that berm would be? Like within the setback, within the fence, on the
Yeah,
other side?
I had it on here, a maximum of 50 feet from the road right of way,
Okay,
so a 7-foot tall fence.
before or after the berm? After.
Added after the berm.
Yeah.
So basically the berm should
First.
buffer.
Mhm.
Yeah, cause then the fence is basically a security issue.
Right.
So you get rid of the site and then the security, so. Alright. Anybody else have any discussion on that? I'm gonna bring up. I'll ask her a copy, you, Anthony, seems like you and I are the ones that have been working with her, so. Ask her to look at that for us.
Might wanna look at the MTA site before you call her, because she's probably gonna recommend what MTA's got. Cause they've got a sample Creo out there now, and they also have a sample of a land use permit, they have a sample of the bonding permissions and all that fun stuff.
Okay. I don't have access to the MTA site, you have to be a member to get it.
Ask Cindy Smith to give you a password, you should, all of you should.
Good luck when you sign up, you're gonna get spammed to death.
Yeah, you just quit, you know. I haven't checked my junk though.
Okay. Thanks, I didn't know that was up there yet.
Oh yeah.
I think the prudent thing for this thing would be to put it on hold and that, let's get some clarification on this. Question, Madam Supervisor,
Yeah.
timing,
Yes,
this could take a couple months. or
Do you wanna
four.
do you wanna have meetings every month for a little bit?
That's what I kinda thinking that we should probably do, is maybe meet monthly. On this, so we would have to schedule a special meeting for October. So I'm sure she could get this back to us by then, so.
So you're gonna do it the first Monday in October?
It would be, without looking at the
Yeah,
calendar.
I was saying it'd be the first Monday in
Yeah,
October.
it'd be like a normal, regular meeting.
Right, so I can just throw it out on the blast there and get it on the,
It'd be October
October 7th.
7th.
we probably have a meeting that week too.
Okay. Can I get a motion to set a special meeting for October 7th?
Make a motion to have a special meeting, Monday, October 7th, at 7 p.m.
You have a motion?
Second.
You have a second? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, we will have a special meeting. Thank you.
Is it a special meeting or just a regular meeting?
It has to be a special meeting.
Yeah, and it's not on the calendar.
Yeah. I think next year, I'd like to try to have regular meetings and then we can cancel them if we don't have it. But we'll deal with that in November. Okay, Tri-Township Master Plan discussion. I put that on the agenda because we had, at the last Tri-Township meeting, this meeting in October, they asked us to bring our goals and objectives. Anything that we would like to see added to that portion of the master plan. And the one thing that I can think of off the bat is the pipe dream, possibly of a walking path around the lake. And I think that'll probably come up, I know it's come up during the election process. That's one thing that I think that we probably wanna make sure is on that. Is there anything else, Anthony, that you hear Scott about maybe wanting to have on?
Everybody calls me, nobody calls me.
Oh, okay.
Recycle center, somebody said. I don't know if that's big enough to go on here or.
There was, one of the things I had talked about a year ago was doing something with the DDA, but that's more of Caledonia Township and not the other two townships. The whole purpose of getting things added to the master plan is for purposes of funding. If there's any grants available, it certainly would help if we had things in the master plan. One thing that I looked through this survey again over the last couple of days, and there was two things that I looked at. One was clean water would seem to be a hot topic coming out of that survey on the lake. And the other was hiking trails, nature trails, and I know Caledonia, we have a lot of public amenities, and that may be something for the other townships to want, possibly. I don't know. But we have the recreation plan already, and I don't know if that's something that we would wanna have in there, but we kinda addressed that on our own already. I guess I'm leaving it up to us to decide how much we, what's that? Not unless we agree that we wanna do that. I have other issues I'd like to discuss with them on that, which I brought up. So. Is there anything you guys can think of that? Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's something that, one thing I thought about would be possibly like a recreation, call it a committee. I see things with the pickleball courts and, you know, groups got together and it'd be nice for, but it's more of a township issue and not a tri-township issue. But the recycle center is a good one, I think that's something that.
Are the hiking trails, are those for horseback riding and stuff too? Cause that might be something, cause there's a lot of people in this community that are, and not just Caledonia, but the other townships that people have horses and they need places to ride them and trails would be nice. Is that something that they can do on the trails that we have here?
I don't know,
I believe, so. I thought
we're just open to the public.
Cornelius is one up there as well, so we don't know for sure, but.
Just a thought.
That's still not in conjunction with the other two townships, so.
Right.
I mean,
Oh, I
what
thought
kind
that
of
could be
walking
because
or
I think there's other
recreation?
townships that also have a lot of rural areas with people with animals and stuff like that. So that's why I thought it would be in conjunction with other townships as well.
They may, I don't know.
They should have
That's
some of
what I'm
the,
trying to think, it should be, yeah, cause there isn't a park in the city.
right, so you should have a lot of the,
Yeah. Should have a lot of
national
forest.
forest.
So, I don't know if we really have around here. As far as
Negogan, Lost Lake Woods.
Are there trails that just kind of intersect all though, and recreational areas that are consolidated?
If you don't play well enough, you can make it from Lost Lake Woods all the way to the mountain end.
Mhm.
It's a matter of how much trail to take, but.
Besides right down the road, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the one thing that I see a lot in if you look at the Michigan snowmobile map, there's trails all over, and there's trails that come up from Mascota County, and there's some up in Osneek, actually, the trail that comes down to Devil's Lake. And that might be something we have the trail, Upper Lake Trail, that takes a lot of effort, because you have to get property rights to do that, but that might be something that could be a tri-township thing. And you can't say that it can't be done, because there's communities that have done it. That trail system is humongous throughout the state, aside from the fact that we don't get much snow, but.
I think now a lot of the ORVs are using them more than the snowmobiles.
Yeah, cause I think you can get to you can go from Barton City to Wisconsin on a snowmobile. It's a little bit of a hike, but, and you can get from Barton City to Osneek, but you gotta make a humongous loop through Gaylord and down to Ascota, Gaylord to Greeley and back to Alpena. So there's an opportunity here that, you know, it might encourage a little bit of recreation and tourism here. If that's something that we wanna add for discussion.
Yeah, I think we should make it usable for all things to that end.
I think before the October tri-township meeting, if anybody thinks of anything, we can add it to a list to bring out. So, that's about all I had for that.
We have a meeting with Lebanon.
Yeah, we do. We'll bring it up again at the next meeting. Moving on then, zoning map update. Anthony, did you have any
I
discussion?
reached out, but I have not heard back.
Okay. I gave you guys a copy of this map. And this is what, I know you've been talking to Denise, and she replied to us on this. The area that we're talking about is right here,
Yep, that little
that
piece.
little sliver.
Yeah, it's spot between, cause it's actually lot 110, part of it is commercial, but not the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, the front is commercial, and then we resolved,
Lot is lot 109 and 110, it's kind of on an angle there, I think. And then 111 is the one we use. But apparently, on the map, it's never been, 110 was never 100%.
this is kind of the same situation that we have along Couple Lake Road, where you get those deep lots in the first 200 feet or 300, whatever it is zone commercial, or has one zoning. And then the back of the property has, out there, it's mostly forest and rec, I think. So I put this on the agenda just so that we can discuss it. She's got this map updated. I don't, my opinion on the planning commission is I don't know that it's really up to us to dictate what somebody does with their own property and the zoning on it. But I just wanted to make it, bring it to the planning commission to have us decide that. But I think if they wanted to do that, since we rezoned the one already, I would definitely wanna support it, because I think it's the intent, it's just the,
I'll reach out to you.
so. But I think at this point, I think that we could have her make this the official map now. Cause this is kind of her interpretation of it, so. And then I think she did get the one on, Bennett Road changed also. There's one right here. It was this one right here.
Okay.
It was residential, and
Okay.
of course they did change it to forest and rec, so. So I guess there's really no other discussion on that needed, I'm gonna just have her change the map, or make that the official map for now, so. And that is all I have for old business. Comments, anybody? Guess we're looking for a motion then.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion? Second.
8:12.
Second by Ken. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, so our next meeting will be October, what was that, 2nd? 7th, October 7th.